Welcome back to another season of the Lions College Football Podcast. I'm Brett Gibbons with TheLions.com, and this year I am joined by Kelley Ford. Kelley, thanks for joining me today, and how are we doing?
I'm doing great, Brett. We've broken down all of the Power 5 and Group of 5 conferences coming into the 2023 season. We are inching ever closer to actual college football games being played. I cannot wait to get into real games and breaking down the thing that we all love, which is college football on Saturdays. All this off-the-field stuff, it's fine fodder for the summer. I am very much ready to get into the fall and start talking real college football games.
Well, the next time we greet everybody, that's what we'll be doing. We'll be talking week 0 very next time. So what is there left to talk about? How about the college football playoff and the Heisman Trophy? That's what we're going over today. It's our last year in the CFP before we go from 4 teams to 12. And I want to start with the college football playoff. There are some obvious contenders, just like there are every year. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan. What do your numbers say about the CFP and who the 4 most likely teams are this year?
Yeah, Brett, and I feel like I do this every preseason in August before we get into the year. You just mentioned the 4 most likely. My numbers, they're always going to support the most likely teams. The most likely teams are the most likely teams for a reason. So when we're talking about probabilities and percent chances to do things, the numbers are going to go with that. The numbers did not see TCU coming out of nowhere last year, so I was certainly not expecting that. No one was. If you're expecting a team like that, man, you should be living in Vegas because you've got some things working in your favor. For me, I have Georgia with a 70% chance to make the CFP, Ohio State with a 53% chance, and those are the only 2 teams, as of right now, that my numbers have as more likely than not to make the college football playoff in 2023. I do have Alabama at 41% and Michigan at 34%. Those are the only teams with greater than a 25% chance to make it, those 4. Of course, 2 out of the SEC, 2 out of the Big Ten. We've never seen in 1 year 2 conferences get 2 teams in. I would be incredibly surprised if that's the actual 4 teams that make it, like those exact 4 teams. But as things stand in August, they are the most likely by my numbers to reach that threshold, which is very difficult to attain, of course, in the 4-team playoff era.
And for those listening who don't follow you on Twitter, number 1, what are we doing? And number 2, go follow Kelley at KFord Ratings. Do you update these projections as the year goes on?
I have, and I will publicly this year. The website, Brett, kfordratings.com, I am getting much better about putting content out there, and I will be better about keeping it up to date as we go throughout the season. So yes, every single week, I plan to update the percent chance that my numbers give every single FBS team to make the college football playoff. As things stand right now, we have 29 teams with a 1.0% chance or better to make the playoff. That number, of course, will be shifting and be whittling down as games are played. But yes, I will update these every single week, post it on Twitter, put it on the website, and I'll be much better about that this year. To answer your question, what are we doing going to a 12-team playoff? I'm not sure we have enough time to talk about that on this podcast. Suffice to say, I am disappointed in it. It is what it is. I was part of the Stay at 4 movement for a very long time. We've lost the battle. We've lost the war, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to watch the 12-team CFP as much as the next person, and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to love college football playoff games on campus. I think that's a phenomenal ad. The thing that I don't like, I talked about during the SEC conference preview that we did, Alabama last year is a really good example. They lost 2 heartbreaking games, nail-biter games, rivalry games. They lost at Tennessee on a last-second field goal. Tennessee fans stormed the field. They hadn't beaten their big rivals in forever. It was a great win. It was awesome. A couple weeks later, they go to LSU. They lose on a 2-point conversion. In overtime, LSU fans storm the field. It was great. Alabama, sitting there with 2 losses, as it turns out, is out of the 4-team CFP. In the 12-team field, they're still comfortably in the CFP, and neither Tennessee nor LSU is going to want to see Alabama because they know that team's going to have a good chance of beating us. And so, to me, I understand when you go into 12 teams, you're bringing in more teams that have, quote, a chance to make the playoff. We're really not changing really the teams that are going to win the national championship. That's okay. But we're bringing in more teams to the party is what people will say. I agree with you. I'm giving people that. What I'm saying the trade-off is that people don't seem to be acknowledging is those big regular season games like Tennessee, Alabama, like LSU, Alabama, they're not going to have the same stakes. Yes, you're still going to be excited to beat your rival. Yes, you're still going to rush the field because of what that game means, but the consequence for losing, that's what I keep coming back to. The consequence of losing in terms of your dreams of winning a national championship are it's inarguable. They're going to be lessened. Some people will say, well, look at Ohio State and Michigan last year. It didn't matter. The loser still got in. You're right. That's the exception, though, not the rule. In a 12 team, that's going to become the rule. Everything had to break Ohio State's way late in the year. Clemson had to lose against South Carolina. Tennessee had to lose against South Carolina. USC had to lose against Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. All these things had to happen for Ohio State to find their way back into the playoff. When we go to 12 teams, those games are for nothing but seeding. Hey, that's what we're doing. It's where we're going. It is what it is. I don't have to like it, but I do have to live with it or get left behind. So I'm going to enjoy 2023, Brett, because it's our final year of the 4 team, which is where I think the CFP should stay. I could get behind 6. I just think 12 is too many.
I'm with you. Fortunately, I don't really let it bother me because I don't believe that college football is a postseason sport. It is a regular season sport that I enjoy at the absolute peak in like week 6 and 7. I actually am not nearly as interested in the college football playoff games, even as a team that I root for, Ohio State, that even if they make it and play, I'm still more invested in the regular season than I am the postseason. Now, bowl season is a different thing, and I love that to death, and you bet me we will talk about it, but I just don't see the playoff as a very exciting product, but I do see the regular season as an exciting product. So outside of these top 4, what's kind of that next tier that comes in for you? And what kind of percentages are you giving that next tier to make a run at the playoff?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple teams. I got Clemson and USC, both with a 25% chance to make it. So I'd still say that's, significant odds given where we are before any games have even been played. Then there's another kind of step drop down. I've got Penn State at 16%, LSU 16%, Texas at 15%, Florida State 14%, Oklahoma 13%, Oregon 12%, and then no other teams have greater than an 8% chance to make the CFP. So I've got 12 teams with a double-digit chance. Georgia and Ohio State better than 50-50. Alabama, Michigan next. Clemson, USC right around 1 and 4. And then Penn State, LSU, Texas, Florida State, Oklahoma, and Oregon. All for accommodations of reasons, projected team strength and projected schedule difficulty and or ease is how we're getting to these numbers for these teams with these August projections, which will be finalized next week as I finalize my preseason ratings.
Yeah, so the reason I'm so interested in that second tier is because I actually bet a couple of them on national championship futures. And to me, the top 4 don't really get me that excited in terms of their price. You got Georgia at plus 230 is their longest odds that I'm looking at right now. Alabama is plus 650, Ohio State plus 750, Michigan anywhere between 8-1 and 10-1. That's kind of where they fall. None of that really excites me very much. But then you start getting into the longer shot territory, and I actually took a flyer on Clemson at 20-1. They're not 20-1 at many places now, but I took them at 20-1 to win the national championship and to make the CFP at plus 320. Now, this is a play on their potential ceiling. Aside from the top 4, to win a national championship, you have to bet their ceilings. That's what the whole name of the game is. And I'm operating under the assumption that Garrett Riley is really going to dramatically improve the offense for Clemson. We talked about it in the ACC preview, but this team was winning 10 or more games without a real good answer on offense, with a quarterback that was underperforming and some offensive coordinators that just were not getting the job done. Now they bring Garrett Riley, who brother of Lincoln Riley and one of the better offensive play callers in the country, and Cade Klubnik. And we've talked about Cade Klubnik. I'm a believer. So I did throw a flyer on Clemson at 20-1, and I also put a flyer on USC to win the national championship at 17-1. It's another ceiling play. I think the defense improves quite a bit. They're bringing in a lot of talent via the transfer portal, and they still have Caleb Williams, who in my estimation is the best quarterback in the country. And I actually don't think it's particularly close. I think he's a home run 1-1 draft pick here in the NFL draft. If you don't do that, in my opinion, you are overthinking it, and you're going to regret it. But, they have the route to the CFP with their resume, a very strong Pac-12. And then once you get there, Kelly, you've even said it's kind of all systems go. All bets are off. Anything can happen in the playoff. And if we can just get USC there, I feel pretty good about those chances. So those are the 2 teams I took national championship futures on. They're the only 2 national championship positions I have, but I feel pretty good about them. Is there anyone with longer than 20-1 odds that you see as a potential contender to win the national championship? And I use contender really loosely.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I talked about it. TCU came out of nowhere last year. No one thought TCU was going to make the Big 12 championship game or make the CFP or make it to the national championship game in August of last year. I mean, if you would have said that, people would have laughed at you. And sure enough, they did. So this is not to say that a team can't come out of nowhere and do it. I recently wrote a piece actually for thelines.com about this, where we looked at what my percent chance to make the CFP are compared to what the Vegas implied odds are, or the Vegas implied probabilities are based on the current odds being offered. I think it was at MGM. And so for me, there were only two teams that came out with, if you want to call it significant, you could even argue one of them. Ohio State came out for me with a plus 6.5% chance. So my numbers gave a 6.5% chance greater than the Vegas implied odds of Ohio State to make the CFP. So to me, there was a little bit of value in Ohio State, even though they are one of the absolute favorites to make the college football playoff. Alabama, similarly, was another team that came out with plus odds by my numbers compared to the implied odds. That one at 1.3% of value, if you will. So again, that's not a ton of value, especially when you're talking about the odds that are being offered. Those were the only two teams, though, with a greater than a 1% positive difference by my numbers compared to MGM. If you want to get really down to the fine details, I think the table had, as I'm looking at it here, it had about 52 teams in it. Brett, you're going to like one of these. 3 other teams came out with, quote, positive value. Oklahoma State plus 0.09%, less than 0.1%. My CFP probability 0.75%, so less than 1%. The Vegas implied at plus 1,500 is 0.66. Here's one you might like, though. I know you like UCF. I have UCF with a 1.07% chance to make the playoff. Vegas implied odds at plus 10,000, 0.99. And the final team is Pitt, 0.03% of value there. I'm giving a 0.69% chance. Vegas has it at plus 1,500. That's 0.66. So there's really not value there. I'm saying this, though, in a table of 52 teams, only 2 of them had greater than 1%. 3 had a very small. There's a large number of teams, Brett, that have significantly worse chances to make the playoff by my numbers than the Vegas implied odds. And I'll let you look into why maybe that is. These teams, though, as they come out for me, Michigan, minus 16%. My odds compared to the Vegas implied odds, I'm giving it a 34% chance. Vegas has it at 50-50. They're plus 100, at least at the time that I wrote the article, based on the MGM odds. Florida State, minus 11% compared to what Vegas is saying. Texas, minus 8. Washington, minus 8. LSU, minus 8. USC, minus 6. So I have USC at 25%. Vegas has it at about 31%. Notre Dame, minus 5. And the list goes on and on with teams that then have less than a 5% negative difference. So not a lot of value is what I kind of found based on what my numbers are. And I think Vegas does that, though, right? They put things out there, trying to get people to make that wager and to get behind teams, especially big brand teams. Every team I just named there is either a really big college football brand and or has a team that's projecting, by the human polls to be a top 10, top 15 team this year. Michigan, Florida State, Texas, Washington, LSU, USC, Notre Dame, Texas A&M is next on that list. Like, there's not a lot of value there for me, but I guarantee you there's a lot of people out there betting these teams, and some of them are going to be right because there are 4 spots to be filled, and I've just got done saying it's not going to be Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, and Michigan. It won't be 2 Big Ten and 2 SECs. It just won't. So someone else is going to make it. They very well could come out of that group.
Yeah, I think that's just shedding light on the theoretical hole that they have in this futures market of just, all these teams that are just, in your estimation, far overvalued. And again, that's just because they're put in gigantic theoretical holds. Welcome to the modern retail sportsbook. Is there a minimum power rating that you look for or a cutoff in which you think or your numbers suggest that teams no longer have a shot at winning a title?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Brett, because historically, if we're looking at year-end power ratings, you're looking at needing to be about a 95 on the 0 to 100 scale that I put out there. And so coming into this year, teams above a 95 right now, that's not year end, right now, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, Michigan, LSU, Texas, Clemson, USC, Penn State. A lot of teams that we just talked about with chances to make the CFP. Then you've got teams just under that: Florida State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Oregon, Oklahoma, and the list goes on. 95 is kind of what you need. I'm thinking back to like Auburn in 2010, the Cam Newton team. That team, I think, ended the year with a power rating of around 89. And last year's TCU team ended the year with a power rating of 89.4. So I know they didn't win the national championship. And had they played better and beaten Georgia in that championship game, no doubt they would have finished with a slightly better rating than an 89.4. I mean, their rating took a somewhat significant hit. Even though Georgia was the best team, one game of their 15-game sample was just a beatdown. And so they did take a hit in that one. Whereas if they were more competitive or found a way to win that in a competitive game, they wouldn't have ended at an 89.4. But TCU was an outlier last year. And I've talked about that, probably overexceeded the expectation, even of their wildest dreams, but they got there, and that's what matters. So yeah, I'd say 95, but again, that's a loose, you can win it being lower than that. If we're looking at the history, like recent history, teams that are 98 plus are teams that typically win it. So now if we're looking at teams with 98 plus in the ratings, you're at Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, and Michigan's at 97.9. So again, that's why these teams are the big favorites, because these are the teams that historically kind of meet that threshold, that composite of what you're looking at for a team strength at the end of the year. Teams are going to go up and down as we play games, but right now, 98 is really solid. 95 is probably what you need to be safe.
Run us through the teams with 95 and greater again, just to give us kind of a pool of what we're dealing with.
Teams with 95 and greater right now, by my numbers, which I'm going to finalize the preseason next week, you've got Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, Michigan, LSU, Texas, Clemson, USC, Penn State. And then in that 90 to 95 range, so, they could get there conceivably relatively quickly during the year, Florida State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Oregon, Oklahoma, Utah sitting there at 89.9. So really no surprises there when you're thinking about who are the teams that you're thinking are going to have a chance to win their conference, make the CFP, win the national championship game. I didn't really put out any spoilers in that group, I don't think. But in the preseason, if you're picking spoilers, you either know something and you're probably putting down significant money in Vegas, or you're throwing darts. And the thing about doing that in college football is you're going to miss more than you make. I'm not going to shoot 100% with the ratings here, but I make more than I miss because we're rolling with the odds and the probabilities. Vegas doesn't build big gold shiny buildings overnight. They do it over time. And that's exactly what they're hoping people are doing, is throwing darts, because for every one that hits, they got 100 that missed, and now they're profiting. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I just rambling about where I'm at with the teams that are at that 90 plus right now.
All right, I want to move on to the Heisman Trophy. The favorite right now, Caleb Williams, plus 550 are the longest odds that I can find for him. And, then it's everybody else. There are 13 players that can be found between 10-1 and 20-1 at time of recording. It truly is, the best quarterback and reigning Heisman Trophy winner. And then every quarterback from every conceivable 10-win team kind of falls in line after that. Do you remember a year where we've had such a gigantic glut of second-tier guys? And even Caleb himself isn't like this runaway favorite to repeat.
Yeah, off the top, I cannot, Brett, remember a year we've had something like this. It does feel about, with Williams being the front runner, it does feel about as wide open as it's ever been in the preseason, at least in recent memory, especially with the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, as you said, coming back and playing college football again this year. I think that just goes to highlight, though, just how extremely difficult it is to win this award twice. I mean, not only is Caleb Williams going to have to be the best player in college football this year, the best offensive player, because we know that defense isn't going to get the votes that they truly do garner in many cases. He's got to be the best offensive player in college football. He also has to top his performance and more importantly, his numbers, because that's how the Heisman Trophy is largely voted on and driven by, his numbers. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's the way that this thing has gone, at least in the last 20 years or so. He has to have better numbers than last year's campaign. So even if he's still the best offensive player in college football, if he doesn't top last year, voters, we've seen it historically, with many examples in the last 10 years, are likely not going to vote for him to win it again. That's just how difficult it is to exceed the threshold that he set for himself, having won the trophy last year.
Every year I write up a long shot criteria list for the Heisman Trophy at the lines. It's one of my very small handful favorite things to write, because I found some outlining criteria that really does help narrow down the field. So if I'm posting a job search for the 2023 Heisman Trophy winner, here's what this list would say. Here's what my requirements are. A minimum of 9 team wins. No winner since 2010 has came with less. You have to be at a Power 5 school. I'm sorry, you just have to. No current group of 5 schools put out a winner since 1963, Roger Staubach, NFL Hall of Famer at Navy. You have to be an offensive player. You mentioned it. The last defensive player, it was Charles Woodson, 97. I was 1, not even 1, when that happened. So, 44 total touchdowns is a benchmark. All 11 of the last quarterback winners have had at least 44 total touchdowns. 47 is preferable. That's 10 of the last 11 quarterbacks. I need a high air yards per attempt and a high touchdown rate. Heisman winners are flashy, right? That's why they win the hardware. And sorry, Caleb, no repeats. The only 2-time winner, Archie Griffin, 1974 and 1975. And in fact, preseason favorites don't even really win the Heisman Trophy at all. Since 2010, just one top 2 favorite took home the award. Marcus Mariota in 2014. No outright favorites have won since 2010. So it's really hard to look at Caleb Williams, really hard to look at Jaden Daniels and say like, well, no, I'm not going to bet you, but like history says you shouldn't. Now some preferred qualifications before the requirements, but here's some preferred qualifications. Minimum 11 team wins. 11 of the last 13 won at least that many. The only exceptions, RG3 in 2011, Lamar Jackson in 2016. I need you at least making a national championship appearance or making a run at it. 7 of the last 13 have made the national championship. You have to be a quarterback. In this, this day and age, it's majorly a quarterback award. 11 of the last 13 winners are quarterbacks. And 50 total touchdowns if you can get to it. 6 of the last 13 and 6 of the last 11 quarterbacks have hit at least 50 touchdowns. So it's a lot. I know I kind of listed that off. If you want to look for it, you can find my article of Heisman long shots at thelines.com, but that's kind of the criteria that I'm outlining. But Kelly, when you're looking for potential Heisman winners, what are you looking for?
Yeah, I think it's hard to top, Brett, the requirements and preferred qualifications that you outlined there so succinctly and backed it up with hard data. I mean, yeah, for the last 15 years, last 20 years, it's been a quarterback. It's an offensive award versus it's a quarterback award. Like, to me, what I'm looking at, and again, I've lost faith a little bit in the Heisman over the years. It's lost some of its luster for me, just as I see. Again, I don't have a vote, obviously. I'm not in the college football media. But as I'm just watching college football games every single Saturday, multiple screens going from noon Eastern until well after midnight with our Pac-12 After Dark, RIP, we got one more year. Like, the best player in college football is oftentimes not awarded the Heisman Trophy. So I don't agree, or the most outstanding player, I think is what we're supposed to term it. That's not who's winning it, though. So I've lost a little bit of faith in the Heisman. I still absolutely love the award. It is the most prestigious individual award you can win. For me, when I'm looking at it, my criteria might be a little bit different because of what I've just outlined. But if I'm trying to pick the winner, who do I think is going to win? I'm doing what you said. I'm looking at the quarterback, and if not the quarterback, the by far, hands down, far and away best offensive player on one of the top teams in the country. I mean, you probably got to make the CFP. You got to be in the top 10 at least at the end of the year, and you're going to have to be a quarterback or just a absolute hands down best offensive player, whether it's Brock Bowers at Georgia or Marvin Harrison Jr. at Ohio State. You could say Blake Corum at Michigan's another one that maybe could be in the mix kind of deal. So that's what I'm looking for. You got to be on a contender first and foremost. You mentioned, RG3, I think probably in what year was it, 2011, that Baylor team, I think they lost 9 games maybe. Or excuse me, they lost 3 games, excuse me. I think they went 9-3 maybe, something like that. And I know Lamar's Cardinals did the same thing. For some reason, I feel like that Louisville team did better than they actually did. And when I think of Heisman Trophy winners who haven't had the most success in terms of win-loss record, for some reason I always think RG3 first, even though I think Lamar actually had the same record. I don't know why RG3 won 6 with me more, that Baylor team. You got to be on a team that's winning a lot. You got to be the quarterback or the best player. So that's what I'm looking for. And those, again, you've already talked about those in your requirements and preferred qualifications. So I guess I'm just reinforcing that with how I'm viewing it through my eyes, which is different than how I would view it if I was actually a voter for the Heisman Trophy.
And there's some other tangential things like about a 67% completion or higher, a quarterback rating of at least 160. There's some other qualifications you can help kind of narrow down this field, but I won't sit here and list every single quarterback that's in the contention for this. But some names that you may want to consider tossing out: Jaden Daniels. I don't know if he has a ceiling to hit 44 or 47 total touchdowns. I haven't seen it. His QBR is not nearly what it needs to be. Will Howard, again, I don't know if he can reach 11 wins. I don't know if he can reach 44 touchdowns. Talking Quinn Ewers falls down lower, but when you're looking at a viable pool, there's some names, and there's some interesting names. Caleb Williams, obviously, Jordan Travis, Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, Joe Milton, right? Michael Penix Jr., Drake May, Sam Hartman, J.J. McCarthy. Those are the kind of the names that I'm looking for that do fit a lot of this criteria, if not all of them. But just a reminder, we deal with college football odds and advanced analytics and models and numbers, but voters don't look at EPA. They don't look at success rate or whatever. It's about flash. It's about circumstance. It's about who's gaudy, right? But those advanced stats can help us project who's going to have some gaudy numbers. So if you want to look at some of the players, there's two players I think that really stick out to me this year who have the highest EPA per play of returners, highest air yards per attempt among returners, and touchdown rate. Joe Milton, top EPA among returning quarterbacks, minimum 100 snaps. 14.3 air yards per attempt, highest among returners, minimum 100 snaps. 12.2% touchdown rate, highest among returners, minimum 100 snaps. And then there's Jordan Travis, 9.8 air yards per attempt, 6.8% touchdown rate. That touchdown rate needs to go up, or he is not going to hit his numbers. But good EPA, good success rate on a very good team with a lot of good weapons. Now, last year, so you don't think I'm just rambling off some random stats and names of who I think. Last year, I picked out Hendon Hooker and Stetson Bennett and Devin Leary. I will throw them in there, rest in peace on that. But Hendon Hooker and Stetson Bennett were picked as my Heisman long shot finalists. And Stetson Bennett was a Heisman finalist, and Hendon Hooker was going to be a Heisman finalist at the very least, should he not have torn his ACL. So I will take a little bit of a victory lap on that, but just to prove that this does have a track record of, hey, these are the things that fit. So if I'm looking at it seriously, Joe Milton, Jordan Travis, those are the two players that have shown me they can hit these benchmarks. Their teams are capable of winning enough games. They're a quarterback in the Power 5 who have all the accolades necessary and the projecting stats to be Heisman frontrunners this year. If you had to look at the list and narrow it down, who is on your short list for the Heisman?
Yeah, in addition to those good options, Brett, I mean, Caleb Williams obviously is got to be at the top. He's a returning Heisman winner. We've talked about how difficult it is. I would not be surprised at all if he doesn't win it, but any conversation has to start with him as the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. So I've got, Caleb Williams on there. Cade Klubnik, we haven't talked about him at all. He's someone that's interesting to me. He's a quarterback, 5-star recruit, now quarterback of a Clemson team that I have with a 25% chance to make the playoff, a favorite in the ACC, so a Power 5 league favorite. Like, to me, if they make the CFP, he's probably going to be at the Heisman Trophy ceremony, just given the nature of winning a lot of games, playing the most important position, and playing for a really good team. Drake May is an interesting one for me. They might not win enough games, but just given the hype he has as an NFL prospect and just his pure talent, he could put, that team on his back. And if he wins 10 games this year, even if they don't win the ACC, if they're at 10-2 at the end of the year and he's put up big numbers and played well and a couple close losses maybe, he could be a name that's in there. Carson Beck, if Stetson Bennett was there, and Carson Beck, you're talking about a Georgia team that's going to be favored by double digits in every game they play this year, at least until they get to Atlanta by my numbers. If you're the quarterback of a 12-0 number one team in the country, you're probably going to be in that conversation. Drew Allar's interesting to me. If Penn State's able to get over the hump and beat Ohio State and or Michigan this year, he might be a year away from some true Heisman hype, but he's a name that has some intrigue for me. I know my short list is getting longer. If we're looking at non-quarterbacks here, I mentioned it. Marvin Harrison Jr. is one. Blake Corum is one. You talked about Brock Bowers being one. Those are some non-quarterbacks, even though we know that the bar is set incredibly high for those players. I think You talked about Hendon Hooker could have been in New York last year if not for the torn ACL, and I agree. And even with that, he probably should have been there if we're being honest. But another one who had an injury derail the Heisman campaign or the Heisman hope was Blake Corum. And so with him being back and with Michigan being a projected favorite in every game, maybe minus the Ohio State game, depending on where you're looking, with my numbers at least, that's where I am. He's one that's going to be in that conversation too. So I've just thrown out a ton of names. I think some combination of that group is probably at least two of the three, if that's how many go to New York, that are going to be there. And then you could get someone, Max Duggan, right? We talked about how TCU came out of nowhere, made the Big 12 12-0, Big 12 championship game, CFP, national championship game, all of that stuff. No one said Max Duggan was going to be a Heisman finalist coming into last year. And if you did, people would have laughed at you. There could be someone like that again, but that goes back to my first point of, if you're on a team that's won 10, 11, 12 regular season games and you're the quarterback, you by default right there, that criteria has put you in the Heisman conversation. Hasn't put you in New York, hasn't won you the trophy. It's put you in the conversation. Max Duggan went to New York last year because his team went undefeated in the regular season, played in the Big 12 championship game, and he was the quarterback. He wasn't the best player on that team. He wasn't the best player on that offense, but he played quarterback, and that's how this award goes. So that's who I'd say, Brett. I know that was a ton of names, but again, my numbers, this is a little bit outside of the scope of kind of K Ford ratings, but just given the amount of the college football that I do watch, and again, I've lost a little bit of luster for this award, but it's still the most prestigious individual award that there is. Of course, I still am intrigued by the Heisman Trophy. I just wish voters would be a little bit more honest with who is the actual most outstanding player of the college football season, not just who's the quarterback of the best team or who's putting up the flashiest numbers, as you've said.
Yeah, and I didn't mention any of the newcomers so far, and you mentioned a few of them. It's hard for me to look at, them without those underlying stats and be able to project, hey, do I think that they're going to be able to hit X amount of touchdowns or not? But I should mention that I think Kyle McCord and Drew Aller are both very live, both of them. That doesn't mean that Carson Beck isn't. But the thing is, Kyle McCord, it's an unresolved quarterback battle. We just got word on Monday that there is not a QB1 in Columbus right now. But whether it's Devin Brown, who, by the way, is wearing number 33 this year as a quarterback, or Kyle McCord, they both have the historical baseline of about 3,000 passing yards and 35 or more touchdowns based on just who Ohio State's brought through their program and what kind of weapons they have and the offense that they run, that you can count on Kyle McCord having, or Devin Brown, having a big statistical year. And it's why I actually put a bet in on Kyle McCord at 20-1, which I will admit, bad value. That number is only going to get longer, especially with the quarterback situation being unresolved. But Kyle McCord, I also bet Joe Milton, and I bet Brock Bowers at 80-1. We mentioned there's a tight end has never won the award. Usually goes to a quarterback, so it's tough there. But if you're giving me 80-1 on maybe the most dominant skill player at his position, maybe the most dominant offensive player at his position with respect to who else he's competing with for that. I mean, Brock Bowers is a clear best tight end, and it's not even close. He's one of the best individual offensive players in the country on what we project as we both see as the top team in the country. So if you're looking at that, maybe we can get a year like a Devonta Smith year where there's no real front runner, especially with that muddied quarterback list, and maybe they give it to a non-quarterback. I'm only taking it because it's 80-1. I also don't mind Jordan Travis at 17-1 either if you're looking that way. But a lot of names. But I will reiterate before we get out of here, Joe Milton, Jordan Travis. Those are my two finalists, my long shot finalists that fit the bill. But I also have bets in on Kyle McCord and Brock Bowers. Just to summarize. That's kind of the pool that I am looking at. Do you have any parting thoughts about this year's Heisman Trophy, Kelly?
I'll just go back to the well and say I can hope that the voters consider all players in both sides of the ball and really think about who is the most valuable, most outstanding player, most valuable player, who has been the biggest disruptor in college football in any given year, not just who's the quarterback of the number one team or who's a quarterback who put up the most numbers. That's wishful thinking, I understand, but that's my probably my final thoughts on the Heisman. I know we'll probably talk more about it as we go throughout the year, but I'm hoping that Caleb Williams has a great year. I'm hoping that he doesn't win the Heisman Trophy again this year, because something about only having that happen one time in the history of college football, I kind of like that. I'm just holding on to some history there. Again, not to say I don't want the young man to have a good season and to play really well. He's good. Barring something catastrophic, I think he's going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft, whether he wins the Heisman Trophy or not. I'm a Colts fan, if we're talking NFL. I know we just picked Anthony Richardson. I'm over here texting my NFL friends, hey, what do we have to do to try to get in the number one pick of next year's draft? Because I don't care we have Richardson. I'd rather get Caleb Williams and see what we can do about offloading Richardson and get something back or whatever. I hope Richardson's good too. But Caleb Williams is going to be the number one pick in the draft, barring something catastrophic. And I just hope that he has a great year, maybe makes it back to New York. But there's something about only having that happen one time that I'm going to cling to. So maybe hope he can be runner-up or something this year. Still have a good year, but not get it.
Well, if we're talking about giving the award to the best overall player in college football, give it to Harold Perkins, send tweet.
Hard to
it's
argue.
not going to happen, but
hard to. I mean, we saw it with Will Anderson a couple years ago too. It's like he was hands down the best college football player in the country that year, in my opinion. I guess everything's debatable, but I thought he should have won the Heisman Trophy. I think many people thought he should have won the Heisman Trophy. Not only did not win, he didn't make it to New York, and it was just like, what are we doing here? Like, what's going on? And again, that's just where we are with the Heisman. It is what it is, just like the 12-team CFP. It is what it is. We're going to move forward with it. Still love this sport, favorite sport, and we'll make the best of it, even though if we were in charge, maybe it'd go a little differently.
Well, yeah, seriously, though, that is a good parting thought for those thinking about maybe putting a flyer on a defensive player. Will Anderson had 31.5 tackles for losses and 17.5 sacks, and he wasn't even a finalist. He wasn't even viewed as the best player on his own team, considering Bryce Young won the award that year. So if that's a benchmark for what a defensive player needs to do to not even win the Heisman, don't even consider a defensive player. I think that's an excellent parting thought there. But hop on over to our Discord server where you can connect with over 4,000 sports betting fans, get live updates in our college football channel, and join a sharp and active community. We will be talking week 0. We're already talking about stuff, but week 0 talks ramp up now. Next time we see you, we're talking week 0. So join our Discord, free Discord. You can get plays from me there, and you can talk with a very sharp community. Don't forget to subscribe to Line's YouTube for daily sports betting strategy videos just like this one. And comment your thoughts on the Heisman Trophy and the college football playoff. Do you foresee value in any of these teams that we talked about or any of the players that we talked about? And don't forget to subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the likes. Kelly, before we get out of here, please let everyone listening and watching know where they can find your work.
Yeah, for sure. You can find me on Twitter at KFordRatings and on the website KFordRatings.com. Brett, I cannot wait for the next time we get together talking real college football games on Saturdays in the fall. It's the best time of year, man.
It sure is. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. I'm Brett Gibbons. That is Kelley Ford. And we will see you all next time where we're talking week 0.